All right, welcome to a really cool lesson where we're going to make this animation here. So a lot of really cool things we're going to talk about, making those spheres look like they're actually rolling around. We're going to be looping the camera. Rather than going forward, we're going to be going up and down. So kind of the box method, but in a completely different axis than we're doing in anywhere else in this course. Some shading fun, a little bit of lighting fun, some material selection fun. There's a lot of things to really be able to apply to so many other motion graphics contexts, and that's why I designed this course, this particular lesson. But short intro, let's run into it. The first thing we are going to need to get is a torus. So I'm going to hit Shift A and get a cylinder. I said torus, I meant cylinder. So what we can do is come down here to this little drop down, and right here on depth, give it a number of 6. Now remember that number 6. That is going to be able to tell us where the stop and start point of our animation, where our camera is going to be. So remember the number 6, and then on the vertices, we're going to give ourselves 32. And then right now, did I initiate that? 30, I meant 120. There we go. Give yourself 120 vertices. All right, my brain's all over the place. You got to slow the brain down. All right, so now that we're here, we need to go ahead and unwrap this object first before we go ahead and start extruding it, just to kind of keep it as its base position, base place. So I'm going to hit Tab, I'm going to hit U to unwrap, and then I'm going to go ahead and give it a cylinder projection. And that is going to get it this nice projection. If I go to the UV editing, we can see, cool, we got a nice cylinder projection that we can go ahead and apply materials to, but that can wait. Now that we're unwrapped, we're good. We can go ahead and start extruding things. So I'm going to hit Tab. Right now, we're just going to set up the scene before we start really learning all the crazy nitty gritty. Let's go to the loop cuts. And if you've never used loop cuts, these are fun. We're going to be adding extra phases and stuff, but we're going to be doing it manually. So if I just go ahead and click, we can go up to this dialog and add as many loops as we want. In this particular design, we are going to go with 6 loops, so we can extrude this one, skip, extrude, skip, extrude, skip. So now that we're here, we can just close that. And then now I want to start selecting our faces. So we can go here to the move tool, and I'm going to click on face. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this face, and I'm going to hold down Shift, click on this face, and then we're going to go back and click on the tilde key. Hold down Shift, and then click Alt, and then you can just click the side here, and that will select these guys. And so now we have all of these selected. Now I could just hit E to extrude, then S to scale, but it's not going to work properly. It's going to, the median point is affecting how this looks. I'm going to hit Control Z, do our selection again. So go back to default. What we need to do is actually go ahead and use individual origins, so each selection scales from its own sort of hypothetical origin. So now we can hit E, S, and scale it out like this, and you can just kind of eyeball it to whatever you like. And then now they look like this. You can see how they're, what is this, convex or concave, but they're kind of pointed out. And we can fix that with the scale tool, and then you can just kind of bring it in, and then I can just kind of zoom in and eyeball. This is not an exact science here, but we can just kind of eyeball it. So now we are here. So let's go ahead and apply materials to this guy. Now we unwrapped it, so we know it's going to look proper. So we can head to the shading tab, and I always remove these 2 windows, and then we can click new, and then I'm going to go ahead and just remove this world opacity. I just don't like it. It's very bright. So click on the principled, and we're going to hit Control T to get this whole image texture set up, and we already have the UV selected, so that's great. So now what we need is some image texture. So go to ambientcg.com, and we're going to go here and explore all the assets, and then go ahead, and I'm going to type in, you can use cloth, you can use metal, you can use anything you want. I'm going to go ahead and pick a very light colored wood. So maybe something like this. But the reason why I'm picking a light colored one, because the environment we're using is very dark, and I want the lights to be able to, reflect as much as possible. Then I'm going to download 4K PNG. So next, just go ahead and navigate to wherever you saved your image texture, and then I'm going to double click on the image, and you can see, hey, it's working except for here, and we'll alleviate that in a minute. Now we could just do more unwrapping to fix that, but we're actually going to use a little bit of design to go around it. Now this looks cool. I actually want it to be rotated on the Z by 90. I want it to, I like this a little bit better. And then you could, oops, I meant 2. We can scale it up if you want, but we can leave it here or do whatever you want. And let's go ahead and hit G and move this over. And then I'm going to hit Control Shift D to duplicate it, but to keep it connected, we're going to click on the number 2 and get in our roughness and switch that over to non-color, and we'll plug that into the roughness. Let's get a normal map, plug that into normal, and then again Control Shift D. Click on that number, and we're going to grab one of those normals, plug it into color. And then we can kind of see, is our bump working? Sure is. We can bring that strength down if we want, but now we can see some detail. So there we go. We now have our nice wood material. Maybe our strength is a little too high, something like this. Then you can right click and shade smooth. Then we can go ahead and give it a bevel material, a bevel nodes and the modifiers, give it a BEV, bevel, and then bevel it however you like. And right click and shade smooth. We're going to use design to be able to go around these extruded UV sections right here. So here's what we're going to do because it'll look really cool. So let's go ahead and hit tab to go into edit mode so we can now see our faces. And you can go here. I want to actually give this section and this section its own unique material. In this case, we're going to turn it into a light. In this case, we're going to turn it into like a metal floor. So in this one, we're going to hold down Alt and then click. We're going to click away first so we don't have anything selected, then Alt and click, and then we'll hold down Shift and Alt click the floor on each of them, and then we'll click on the material. I'm going to click the plus icon, click New, and then here on the principled, we're going to switch over to Emission, and then we'll go back to Material Preview, and then we'll assign it, and then now it's doing that. And we can give it, I like to give it a slightly blue color. And then right here on these bottom ones, we'll do the same exact thing. So click just to kind of deselect everything, hold down Shift and Alt, click those floors, get a new material, and we're going to switch this one to metallic, kind of shiny, and assign. And so now we have these lights on the bottom, metal floor on the top. We're not going to see this, so we're not going to change it. And now we now have this whole thing doing what this whole thing wants to do. Now let's set up our spheres that are going to go around this object. So I'm just going to go ahead and call him P-I-L-L-E-R. Remove him. Let's hit Shift-A, and we're going to go ahead and get in a UV sphere. I'm going to hit the period key just to kind of zero it out. Hit Tab, right-click, subdivide once. Bring that smoothness up. And then what we can do, I want to select the middle pieces. So I'm going to hit the tilde key and go to the front. I just want to select, this middle section. I want to extrude it inward. So what we can do is go here to the toggle X-ray. So we select everything on the back and the front. And then click and drag and select both. There we go. So now everything's selected. Then we can go right out of edit mode. X-ray mode. I'm going to hit E for extrude and then S. And we'll scale it in, pretty significantly. Make it dramatic. There we go. And then what we can do is just go ahead and do our material assigning now. So new. We'll make it metallic, and then we'll get a new one here. We'll make it an emission and assign that. We can kind of see it working here, just like that. Let's get a bevel node just to finish him off. So BEV. So we are just setting up our scene now to look proper. Shade smooth. So now we have this thing. So now what I want to do is get the sphere to be able to rotate in a circle around this pillar. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the pillar again in the outliner, and I'm going to hit Shift-A and get in a curve and a circle. And that's what this circle is going to be able to attach to using something called constraints. I highly encourage you, look into constraints, get to know them. They're really, really cool. But 90% of the time I'm using it for this, which is attaching something to a curve so that it'll follow it. So I'm going to click on the sphere, go to constraints, and get a follow path, and the target is the Bezier circle. So now if I play with the offset, he is going to go around in a little circle. So I'm going to bring my pillar back, And I'm gonna go to the front view with the tilde key. Actually, no, we're gonna go to the right. Click on the circle and bring it out a little bit. And then this guy, let's bring him to an appropriate size. And then I just wanna rotate him by 90 degrees on the X. And then we can just click on the circle and then rotate it. He needs to be smaller till it's just barely touching the side here. So I can zoom in and hit S and get it there. There we go. So now he's ready to roll around on our pillar. So here is all of the initial setup to get this to work. I do want to use 250 frames. I'm going to go back to frame 0. And let's go here. Click on this circle. And then we're going to go back to our constraints. And first thing we need to do is go and play with the offset. Now, if we remove this around, you'll notice once we get back to the original point, that's going to be 100. So a 360-degree rotation within the follow path constraint is 100. An offset of 100 is 1 rotation. I want to do 2 rotations. So I'm going to click on the keyframe, make sure you're at frame 0, go to the end and type in 200 to get yourself 2 rotations. So now he's going around twice. Cool, very cool. Now what I want to do is to be able to get this guy to look like, figure out what axis it looks like it's the Z axis, to actually look like he's rolling around, which means we have to play with this dude here. So what we can do is we can click here and then go to the end and I go, okay, try to imagine like how many rotations, how many times is he going to roll around? And so I'm going to say maybe 4. So I'm going to type in a rotation. So we're going to do 360. So that's, 1 rotation, asterisk, which is your multiplication. So 360 times 4, which is 1440, and I'm going to hit I. And let's see. No, he looks like he looks like he's sliding around. Doesn't look like a real rotation. I'm gonna be kind of extreme with it. I'm gonna do 360 asterisk 6. I'm gonna type in I. I think 1 more. I've been doing this long enough. I feel like I could trust my gut. So 360 asterisk 7, enter. That's the money right there. So now he is rolling around our pillars and just being a all-around good dude. There we go. Now I want this to actually look cool. I want this to look nice. I want whenever we're running up and down our camera, so we have a lot of spheres moving around. So to really fill this up, make the scenes feel full, I want to have 2 spheres per ring. This would be a ring here. So what I want to do is I'm going to hit Shift D, and then we're just going to have to, I'm going to go back to frame 0 and go back to our constraint, and we're going to clear the offset of this constraint, and he needs to be on the opposite side, which is going to be 50. And so now he's going to, but we need to reanimate him. But the problem is we have to add 200, right? So not really a problem. I don't know why I called it a problem. But now we have to do 50. So we're starting at 50, but we need to do 2 rotations. So we're going to do 50 plus 200. So 250 will be the amount of rotations we want. So I will do asterisk, start at frame 0, go to the end and type in 250 asterisk. And now they're moving around. Now, you might say, hey, why do you animate it in the, right here in the constraint? Why don't you just take this guy and move him, and it moves them both at the same time? That's true. That would save us a lot of time. But, and the only reason why I know this is because I designed this whole scene, we are going to need to actually rotate these a little bit and rotate them around and have some control. And if that's being animated, it won't be quite as easy. And also I think it's just good to know how to use constraints. So even though maybe we're adding more work, I think just for the sake of the lesson, knowing how this works is great. And then you can go ahead and strip down the work later on. Because I know we could use delta transform and move it like that. True, but I did want to just have an excuse to show you constraints as well. So now that these guys are moving, here's a fun trick that Blender makes our lives much easier. If we go ahead and click this guy, click this guy, and click this guy, and then hit Shift D, and then right up here, make sure you keep it selected, this new circle. If I just click him, I'm gonna go to the Move tool, and I bring them up, they're already attached. I'm so glad Blender makes our lives easier with that particular trick. So it knows, okay, attach it to the new circle, and then we can do the same thing. So go ahead and hit Shift D and then select that new circle down here. Cool. Now they're here. So now what I want to do is I want to offset each of them a little bit so they're not on top of each other. I want them to be kind of like that. And so what I'll do is I will select, I'll select the middle one and I will offset it a little bit like right about there. We can do it mathematically, I guess. But as I said before in the course, I am more of a visual guy. So there we go. And now all of them are animating together. So now we are finished with the initial setup of this particular, what's going to be now a collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this whole thing. I'm going to hit M, new collection, and we're going to call it loop. Now we're here. Now what we can do is actually make this a looping animation with the camera moving where the camera's up at the top and goes down, but of course making that a looping animation. So what we can do is I'm gonna hit Shift A. In our collection instance, we'll click loop, and then I'm gonna hold down Control and snap him to that one. I'm gonna hit Alt D and bring him and snap him there. Of course, holding down Control like that. And then what I can do is I'm gonna hit Alt D and then just move him over a little bit. And I'm not too worried about his position. And I'm gonna hit Alt D, hold down Control and bring him up. Alt D, Control, bring it up. So now I'm gonna just look at the front here and check out our animation. Clearly, all of these guys are intersecting. So we need to fix that first before we get our camera moving. So what I can do is just highlight this, and then we can just try to move it to where, see that? We can move it right here in the middle. I'm just going to go to the frame, the frame 0 to keep it at the beginning. So let's go to right where they're intersecting. So, you know, right there. So move him. I'm hitting R to move them. And hopefully, so now we have some intersection. So what I'm going to do is rotate it over again. So let's see, right when they're intersecting, do something like this. And because they're all offset, eventually we are going to get, there we go. That is the money shot, and then you can just move them in a little bit, and then maybe a little bit farther back. But now we should not have anything intersecting, but where they're almost hitting, and it looks super cool. This is where we are. Now we can move our camera. Now remember I said, remember the number 6. Let's go ahead and get our camera and then move him out like this. And then we can go here to the object transformations, and on the X, just try to center this out here. Just kind of eyeball it, something like this. And then here on the Z, type in -6. So we can just start at one of those 6s. And then we're going to go to frame 0, and we'll hit a keyframe. Now, because I know that this guy is a scale of 6, so if we go to the -6 to the +6, the animation will start and stop at the same look because we instanced a collection on top of it and below it. So now we know that camera's not going to see them cut off. So we're at -6. We can go here to +6, keyframe, and then now we can enjoy a really cool animation. How about this? And this is really just, it loops because we understand scale. We understand that, you know, for anything to be a looping animation, the beginning and the end have to be precisely the same. And no one's going to know that the camera's starting up and then going back to the bottom because it looks the same. So that is really the power of the box rule and having a little bit of that math knowledge. I don't even know if I would call it math knowledge, but that's where we are. We can go to render. Now you can render this in Eevee if you want. This just, in my opinion, looks far better in Cycles. So we are going to use Cycles to render this. So I'm going to go from Eevee to Cycles. And now we have this really sweet looking animation. So there's a couple things that I want to do here to sweeten up the animation. So first, I'm going to go ahead and select one of the non-instance objects, one of the original objects. And then I'm going to zoom in here. Go here to the material section, and I'm going to get this over to be a green, maybe a nice bright green, and make sure you're in the filmic color space. So now we have a green going on, and then we'll click on the metal material, make it a little less rough, maybe something like this. And then what I want to do now is go here to the specular and play with the anisotropic rotation. So see, notice how the reflections look on this guy and this guy. If I turn on anisotropic, it's going to like curve it out. See, so if we play with it, notice this reflection. I'm going to bring the anisotropic off. Looks like this. If I bring the anisotropic on, swirls it out. Totally up to you to not do it at all if you don't want to. And you can play with the rotation here to maybe go like more like that, make it just straight up and down, or make it look a little more swirly. I'm going to go with swirly reflections. But I think it looks super cool, and I kind of wanted an excuse to use anisotropic. And then you can play with, you know, how much anisotropic do we want it to be? Like totally anisotropic. Take a shot every time you say anisotropic, unless you're under the age of 21 in the United States. Okay, we're back. We are done with that. Now I want to play with this emission material to give it a little bit more life and a little bit more detail. So we're going to do a little bit of a shading lesson. So again, select one of these original pieces, one of these original objects. So if like you select here, we're not getting any material. That's because that's an instance. Select a non-instanced object, and we're going to head up to shading. I'm going to hit 0. And then now we have a view of our emission material. What I want to do is I'm going to hover over here and hit Control C just to copy and capture that color. And then I'm going to hit Shift A and get in a color ramp. And we're going to select him and paste that there and go there. So what I want to do is manipulate the color and the look of this emission material. And that's going to be done with a really fun node called the layer weight. And what he does is creates these like edge fall off looks. So if I play with the blend, you can kind of see how that's working. In my case, I'm going to flip my color ramp because I want the fall off to be out there, not in the middle. I want the middle to be the highlight. So you can play with that blend until you get something like this. I mean, how cool is that? You might like, oh, that's kind of a dramatic gradient. We can maybe go over to B-spline to have a little bit more mercy on us. So we can do something like this and then make that a little bit more smooth yet aggressive at the same time. Something like this. And like, if you don't like that it's black, what you can do is, hit Control C on that color, Control V, and then bring it down. So instead of it being pure black, we can just do a very, very dark green. But now we've added, if we go back to cycles, we've added this bit of detail within our object, within this emission material. And I just think it makes it look so cool. We're going to do a strength of probably maybe 50. That might make sure that's not too bright. I like the reflection on there. So that makes a really cool lighting effect of it just like shooting to the side. But you get this beautiful highlight in the middle and this nice green fall off. It adds extra detail to your animation. And I just think I think it looks so slick. All right, now that we're here, we are getting close to being finished. We can just kind of admire what we've done so far. Next thing I want to do is just give it a little bit of fog. The reason being, right now our world brightness is gray, so we can click on the camera and go, click on the world, sorry, and bring that world brightness to black. I am not a fan of these pure black backgrounds. I think even this one, it potentially is excusable because parts of the design do fade into black, so it marries right into that black background. But I think adding some fog into this animation will just make it look super, super awesome. So click on the world again. We'll go to volume and add in a principled volume, and then just give it a little bit of volume, something like this, to where we can start, I'm holding down Shift and just giving it a slight amount of fog. And that will just kind of harness the fact that we have these really cool lights going. And then I'm going to go ahead and render just to see how this looks. So this is how, with a little bit of denoising, it's very muddy, but that's just its low sample count. This is how the fog now looks with everything. And I think it just looks really nice and really polished. These lights are, shining onto the side, giving you this really, really awesome look. And everything is super sweet. If you didn't render, go ahead and render it. We're going to do a little bit of compositing to really just polish off these highlighted parts. So give yourself a Cycles or Eevee render, and we're going to hop into compositing now to make it glow. So click on Use Node, then I'm going to hit the period key. I'm going to hit Shift A and get in a Viewer node. And then plug this here. I'm going to hold down Control and right click. And so that everything goes into the composite and the viewer, so it actually renders out, and we are going to get in a glare node. So now we have this. We're going to go from streaks to a nice fog glow, and then I'm going to bring my mix down. First thing I definitely want to do is bring up the brightness of the green and bring down the brightness of these kind of bluish, whitish ones, and then re-render to see how everything is going to look. So I'm going to go to the material preview, select, make sure this is an original piece of geometry. We'll go to the materials. On this one, we'll do maybe... We'll go back to cycles actually because we need a reference. We'll go on an emission of like 8. That still looks good. And then on this guy, we'll give it a strength of 100. That'll really give you a nice pop, but also be able to pop with that glare node. So I do want a couple of these guys pointing at me. And let's re-render. All right, cool. So now you can see when the glare pops in, we have this beautiful glare here. And then in the compositing, we can go ahead and bring that mix down, which is like your how strong that glow is. So I'm going to say something like this probably looks really nice. And then maybe bring down the brightness of this a little bit more, and it'll be perfect. So now we have this whole render done and ready to go. I am going to go ahead, of course, in the render, turn on your denoising. I would highly recommend that. And then in the samples, I know it's going to be a lot, but 500 on the samples, that'll really make it look clean. Or you can render it up 4K and like 150 samples. You can kind of try to, pick and choose your battles. So that is what I'm going to render my settings at, and we are done with this whole scene. We have this beautiful looping animation. It looks awesome. It's clearing through. The spheres look like they're moving around. All of these guys, none of them are colliding. There's so much awesome transferable content here for other videos and ideas for your own client work, for your own motion graphics, all that stuff. And that's it. Hope you got some stuff out of this. Onward to the next lesson.